The whip cracked like a gunshot, and I saw the woman fall to her knees in the creek. Water ran red around her, too red for just mud. That's when I stopped being the man who minded his own business. I'd been checking the beaver dam near my property line that morning. Spring runoff had been heavy that year, 1884, and I needed to make sure the water was flowing right through my irrigation channels. The Montana sky stretched overhead, pale blue and endless, the kind of sky that made a man feel small and alone. I was used to feeling that way. Had been for 3 years. The sound came again. Not thunder, not a branch breaking. A whip cutting through air and finding flesh. I guided my horse through the cottonwoods that lined the creek bank, moving slow, keeping quiet. My hand went to the Winchester rifle slung across my saddle. Old habits from the war. Always be ready. Always assume trouble. Then I saw them. 3 men on horseback circling a woman who knelt in the shallow water. Even from 50 yards away I could see she was different. Tall. Impossibly tall, even on her knees. Her shoulders were broader than any woman I'd ever seen, built like she'd been carved from the same Montana granite that formed the mountains to the west. Her hands were tied behind her back. Blood traced a line from a cut above her eyebrow, running down her face to her jaw. Her shirt was torn, revealing welts across her shoulders. Fresh ones, still bleeding, but it was her eyes that stopped me cold. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging. She was staring at the man with the whip with pure, undiluted hatred. The kind of hatred that came from somewhere deep and old and justified. I recognized one of the men immediately. Virgil Dutch. He'd worked my ranch 2 summers back before I caught him beating a horse half to death because it had stepped on his foot. Some men you fire with a handshake and severance pay. Some men you throw off your land with a rifle. Dutch was the second kind. He'd left swearing revenge, promising he'd make me regret it. I'd forgotten about him. Apparently, he hadn't forgotten about me. The second man was younger, maybe 30, with the cold eyes of someone who'd killed before and would do it again without losing sleep. He held the reins of his horse loose in one hand, the other resting on the revolver at his hip. Professional. Dangerous. The third was just a kid. 18, maybe 19. Nervous. His horse kept dancing sideways, picking up on the boy's anxiety. Dutch raised the whip again. The woman flinched but didn't lower her head, didn't give him the satisfaction. I'd promised myself 3 years ago that I'd never walk past someone in need again. That promise had cost me more than most men could understand. But it was the only thing keeping me human, keeping me from disappearing completely into the empty halls of my cabin and the ghosts that lived there. I squeezed my heels against my horse's flanks and rode forward, breaking through the tree line. The sound of hooves on creek stones made all 3 men turn. Dutch's hand froze mid-swing, the whip hanging in the air like a question mark. The man with cold eyes reached for his revolver but didn't draw. Not yet. He was calculating odds, measuring distances, deciding if I was worth the risk. "That's close enough," he said. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. The kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd stopped caring about consequences a long time ago. I stopped my horse 10 feet from them, near enough to be a threat, far enough that I had room to maneuver if shooting started. My Winchester stayed loose in my grip, not aiming, not lowering, just ready. I looked at each man in turn. Then I looked at the woman. She stared back with dark eyes that held no hope, no expectation of rescue, just weary curiosity, like she was watching to see what kind of man I was, testing me without asking a single question. "You boys got business here?" I asked. My voice came out quiet, but it carried. 3 years of silence had taught me how to make words count. Dutch recovered first, his swagger returning now that the initial surprise had passed. He gestured at the woman with his whip, grinning. "Private business, Moss. Found her wandering 3 days back. She's ours now." "She got a name?" I asked. "Hell if I know. She don't talk much." I kept my eyes on the woman. "That true? You don't talk?" For a long moment she said nothing. Then, slowly, she spoke. Her voice was damaged from lack of water, rough as gravel, but clear and steady underneath. "My name is Theia." The sound of her own name seemed to surprise her, like she hadn't spoken it aloud in a very long time. like she'd forgotten what it felt like to claim something as simple as her own identity. Dutch's face darkened. "Nobody told you to speak." He raised the whip again. The crack of my Winchester cut him off. The bullet kicked up creek water 3 inches from Dutch's boot, soaking his pants leg and making his horse rear. All 3 men froze. The cold-eyed man's hand was on his revolver now, fingers curled around the grip but not drawing. The mathematics of the situation were clear as creek water. I had the rifle already aimed. By the time any of them cleared leather, at least one would be dead, maybe 2, and I'd make damn sure it was Dutch first. "I think your business here is finished," I said. Dutch's face went red. "You got no right." "I got every right. This is my land you're standing on. Creek runs through my property for half a mile either direction. That makes this my business." It was a lie. The creek was open range, had been since Montana became a territory. But the lie was delivered with such flat certainty that doubt flickered across Dutch's face. The cold-eyed man studied me for a long moment, weighing odds. He was a professional. He knew when to push and when to fold. And right now, with one rifle already aimed and his boss standing in the open like a carnival target, the smart play was to retreat. He nodded once. "Let's go." Dutch sputtered. "We spent 3 days tracking her down. We got rights to salvage." I said, "Let's go." The cold-eyed man's voice carried the weight of final authority. He turned his horse and started riding north without looking back. The nervous kid followed immediately, relief obvious in the way his shoulders dropped. Dutch hesitated, knuckles white around the whip handle. His eyes promised murder. Then he spat in the creek, deliberately aiming toward the woman, and yanked his horse around hard enough to make it stumble. He kicked it into a run, chasing after the others. I watched until they disappeared over the northern ridge. Only then did I lower the Winchester. Only then did I let out the breath I'd been holding. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the flood of something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. The electric thrill of standing between evil and innocence. The terrible, addictive rush of choosing to act instead of watching. Theia stood motionless in the creek, hands still bound behind her back, blood still trickling from the cut above her eye. She watched me with that same careful, measuring gaze, not grateful, not relieved, just watching, waiting to see what I would do next. I dismounted slowly, keeping my movements deliberate. No sudden gestures. She'd been hurt enough by sudden movements. I pulled my knife from my belt and approached her. She didn't flinch when I moved behind her to cut the ropes. The bindings fell away, revealing deep purple bruises circling both wrists. The skin was raw in places, infected. She'd been tied for days, not hours. She brought her hands forward slowly, flexing her fingers as circulation returned. Even her hands were huge, strong, calloused from hard work. "You hurt anywhere else?" I asked. She touched the cut on her forehead gingerly, then looked at the blood on her fingertips like it belonged to someone else. "Why?" she asked. "Why what? Why did you help me? What do you want?" It was the same question everyone asked when you did something decent. 3 years in Montana territory had taught me that kindness was so rare people assumed it came with a price tag. I could have lied, could have said it was the right thing to do, left it at that. But I looked at this woman, this giant, broken, furious woman standing in a creek stained with her own blood, and I told her the truth. 3 years ago, I didn't help someone, and they died. I can't fix that. But I can make damn sure I don't make the same mistake twice. Something shifted in her eyes. Not softening exactly, but a kind of recognition, like she understood the weight of regret because she carried her own. "What was their name?" she asked. The question surprised me. Most people didn't ask about the dead. Death was uncomfortable. People changed the subject, offered empty condolences, anything to avoid the raw edges of grief. "Clara," I said, "my wife, and Bea, my daughter. She was 6 years old." Theia nodded once, a small gesture that somehow encompassed understanding, sympathy, and shared loss all at once. "I am Theia Harrow," she said, "and I am not a thief." "Didn't figure you were." Dutch will tell people I am. He'll tell them I'm dangerous, that you're harboring a criminal. Dutch is a liar and a coward. Anyone who knows him knows that. And the people who don't know him? I didn't have an answer for that. Small towns ran on gossip and suspicion. A stranger, especially one who looked different, would be guilty until proven innocent. And sometimes not even then. We stood there in the creek, water flowing around our ankles. The sun had broken through the clouds, turning the water silver. Somewhere upstream, a bird called out, sharp and clear. Two damaged people measuring each other, deciding whether trust was possible in a world that had given us every reason to believe it wasn't. Finally, I made a choice. I have a ranch 2 miles west, I said. Barn's got clean hay. Well's got clean water. You can rest there. For how long? Long as you need. Theia studied my face, looking for the lie, the catch, the hidden price. I met her gaze steadily. I had nothing to hide, no ulterior motives, just a promise I'd made to myself 3 years ago, standing over 2 fresh graves. Never again. Never walk past. Never turn away. Everything has a price, Mr. Moss, she said. So she knew my name. Dutch must have mentioned it. Or maybe she'd asked around before this happened. Smart, careful, the kind of thinking that kept you alive when you were alone and hunted. Then you can pay me back by telling me what Dutch meant, I said. What did you steal? Theia's face hardened, her jaw set. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she said, I stole my freedom. The ride back to my ranch was quiet. Theia sat behind me on my horse, her weight shifting the animal's gait. She was heavy, solid muscle and bone, but she moved with surprising grace, like someone used to making herself as small as possible despite her size. I could feel the tension in her body. She held herself rigid, maintaining distance even though we shared the same saddle. Every few minutes, she'd turn her head, checking behind us, waiting for Dutch and his friends to come back. They wouldn't. Not today. But they'd come eventually. Men like Dutch always came back, meaner, better prepared, looking for revenge. The grassland stretched out around us, endless and golden in the afternoon light. This was my favorite time of day. The harsh brightness of noon had softened into something gentler. The mountains to the west threw long shadows across the valley. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, like everything in Montana. We crested a rise and my ranch came into view. It wasn't much. A small cabin, maybe 20 feet square. A barn that leaned slightly to the east, victim of wind and my amateur carpentry. A corral with 6 horses. Fields I'd been trying to coax into productivity for 3 years with mixed results. But it was mine. Every board, every fence post, every foot of irrigation ditch represented work and sweat and stubborn refusal to give up. After Clara and Bee died, half the town expected me to sell and leave. Go back east. Start over somewhere without ghosts. I'd stayed instead. Built something, or tried to. Theia's posture shifted as she took in the property. I felt her lean forward slightly, studying the layout, the defensive positions, the sight lines, military thinking, or survival thinking. Sometimes they were the same thing. You live alone? She asked. Yeah. A pause, then quieter. Wife? Children? The question landed like a fist to the gut. 3 years hadn't dulled that particular pain. Had both once, I said. Don't anymore. I felt her nod against my back. A small acknowledgement of shared loss. She understood. Maybe that's why she'd asked. To know if I understood her, too. We rode into the yard. I dismounted first, then helped her down. She stumbled slightly, exhaustion finally catching up now that immediate danger had passed. I caught her elbow to steady her. Up close, she was even more imposing. 6'10", maybe taller. I was 6'1", and I had to tilt my head back to meet her eyes. Barn's got a cot and blankets, I said. You can rest there. I'll bring food and water. Theia looked at the barn, then at the cabin, then back at me. You're not going to ask questions, she said. Not quite a question, more like testing a hypothesis. Figure you'll tell me what you want me to know when you're ready. For the first time since I'd seen her at the creek, something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around the eyes. Recognition of decency she clearly hadn't expected to find. "Thank you," she said quietly. I nodded and turned toward the cabin. Behind me I heard her heavy footsteps crossing the yard toward the barn. I paused at my door and looked back. She stood in the barn doorway, silhouetted against the darkening sky, tall and imposing and impossibly alone. Then she stepped inside, and the shadows swallowed her. I went into my cabin and closed the door, leaned against it for a moment, eyes closed, wondering what I'd just gotten myself into. 3 years of quiet. 3 years of keeping my head down, working my land, speaking to no one unless absolutely necessary. And now I'd inserted myself into something that would almost certainly end in blood. I opened my eyes and moved to the window. Through dusty glass I could see the barn. No light showed from inside. Theia was already resting. Or trying to. I wondered how long it had been since she'd felt safe enough to actually sleep. I turned away and started gathering supplies. Bread from yesterday's baking. Dried meat. A jar of preserves Clara had made 4 years ago, before everything fell apart. A canteen of fresh water, bandages and salve for the wounds I'd seen. As I worked, my mind turned over the situation like a man examining a puzzle with missing pieces. Dutch had said they'd found her wandering. 3 days of tracking. That meant she'd been running. From what? From where? And why was she alone? A woman, especially one who looked different, didn't survive long in Montana territory without protection. Family, community, something, unless she'd lost those things, or been driven away from them. I gathered the supplies into a canvas sack and headed out to the barn. The barn smelled of hay and horse sweat and old wood. I paused in the doorway, letting my eyes adjust to the dimness. Theia sat on the cot in the corner, her back against the wall. One hand rested near a rusted pitchfork that leaned against a support beam. She'd positioned herself so she could see both exits, the main door and the small side door I used for mucking stalls. Smart. Careful. The behavior of someone who'd learned not to trust. "Brought food," I said, holding up the bundle. "And water. Some bandages for that cut." Theia nodded but didn't move. Her eyes tracked me as I crossed the barn floor. I could feel her measuring every step, every gesture, ready to fight or run if I gave her reason. I set the supplies on a wooden crate near the cot, then backed away immediately. Gave her space. Showed her I understood boundaries. "I'll be in the cabin if you need anything," I said. "Wait." The words stopped me. I looked back. Theia was staring at the bundle of supplies, her expression unreadable. Then she raised her eyes to mine. "Why?" she asked again. The same question as before, but this time there was something different in her voice. Not suspicion. More like genuine bewilderment. As if kindness was a puzzle she couldn't solve. I thought about how to answer. I could give her the easy response. It's the right thing to do. But that felt hollow. So I told her the truth instead. 3 years ago, I said, my wife and daughter were traveling to town. It was July, middle of summer. They'd been at Sunday service. I paused. This part never got easier, no matter how many times I went through it. The wagon wheel broke on the main road, 100 yards from the church. They were stuck. Clara sent B to knock on doors, ask for help fixing the wheel. Theia's expression didn't change, but I saw her hands tighten on the edge of the cot. 7 houses, I continued. 7 doors. Every single one closed in a 6-year-old's face. We don't help strangers, they said, even though Clara had lived in that town 5 years, even though B was born there. Because your wife was Indian, Theia said quietly. Not a question, a statement of fact. Crow Nation, I confirmed, and B was half. That was enough for some people to decide they didn't deserve help. I looked out the barn door at the fading light. By the time I found them 3 hours later, B had heat stroke. She was unconscious. Clara was barely awake. I got them home, got the doctor, but it was too late. B died 2 days later. Clara followed a week after. The silence in the barn was absolute. Even the horses in their stalls seemed to sense the weight of the story. The doctor said it was heat stroke that killed B, I continued, and grief that killed Clara. But I know the truth. They died because 7 people decided that helping them wasn't worth the inconvenience, because they were different, because they didn't belong. I met Theia's eyes. I can't bring them back. Can't change what happened, but I can make damn sure I'm not the person who rides past someone who needs help, even if it costs me. Theia was quiet for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle. "I'm sorry," she said, "for your loss." I nodded. "Eat. Rest. We'll figure out next steps in the morning." This time when I turned to leave, she didn't stop me. I made it halfway across the barn before her voice reached me again. "I'm from the Crow Nation too," she said. "My mother was Crow. My father was a British surveyor, Edmund Harrow." I turned back to face her. She wasn't looking at me anymore. Her eyes were fixed on some distant point only she could see. "That's why I'm like this." She gestured at herself, at her height, at the breadth of her shoulders. "Too big, not Indian enough for my mother's people, not white enough for my father's world, caught in the middle my whole life." "Your father," I said. "Where is he now?" "Dead, 6 months ago. Mining accident in Helena, cave in." "I'm sorry." Theia shook her head. "Don't be. He loved me. That's more than most mixed-blood children get." "What happened after he died?" Her jaw tightened. "The mine owner said my father owed back wages, said I was part of the estate, wanted to put me in traveling shows, exhibit the giant woman, make money off my difference." Rage flared in my chest. I kept it off my face. Barely. "You ran," I said. "I ran. 6 months ago. Been running ever since. Dutch and his friends caught me 3 days ago. You know the rest." I studied her. This woman who'd been treated like property her whole life, who'd been hunted and caught and hurt, and who still had enough strength to stare down her captors with pure defiance. "You got family anywhere?" I asked. "Someone I can send word to?" "No. My mother died when I was 12. I have cousins among the Crow, but I haven't seen them in years. They might not even remember me." "Then you stay here until you're strong enough to decide what comes next," I said. "No obligations, no expectations." Theia met my eyes. For the first time since I'd seen her at the creek, something like hope flickered across her face. Small, cautious, but there. "Okay," she said. "Thank you, Garrett." I hadn't told her my first name, which meant she'd been listening more carefully than I'd realized during the confrontation with Dutch. Smart. Observant. Survival skills honed sharp by necessity. "Get some sleep, Theia," I said. I left the barn and walked back to the cabin under a sky filled with stars. The night was clear, cold. Spring in Montana meant warm days and freezing nights. The kind of cold that got into your bones and reminded you winter wasn't really gone, just resting. Inside, I went through my nightly routine, banking the fire in the stove, checking the rifles, making sure they were loaded and within reach, setting out ammunition on the table, making sure the shutters were secure. For 3 years, these rituals had been empty, mechanical, going through motions because that's what you did to survive. Tonight felt different. The cabin felt different. Not quite so much like a tomb, more like a shelter, a place with purpose beyond just keeping rain off my head. I lay down on my bed, fully clothed, one hand resting on the revolver under my pillow. Sleep came slowly. When it finally arrived, the last thing I thought about was the way Theia had said my name, testing it out, deciding whether it was a name she could trust. I woke to darkness and the sound of scraping. For a moment, I lay still, orienting myself. The sound was coming from outside, rhythmic, deliberate, like someone digging. I grabbed my revolver and moved to the window. Lantern light spilled from the barn. The side door was open. I pulled on my boots and coat and moved outside, keeping low, using the shadows. The scraping sound grew louder as I approached. I reached the barn door and looked inside. Theia knelt on the floor near the back wall, digging with her bare hands. Dirt piled up around her. Her leather satchel lay open beside her, the one I'd seen at the creek but hadn't questioned. "What are you doing?" I asked. She froze, then slowly turned to look at me. Her hands were covered in dirt, fingernails broken and bleeding from the hard-packed earth. For a long moment she didn't answer, just stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. Fear, determination, something desperate underneath. Then she reached into the satchel and pulled out two things. The first was a leather-bound ledger, about 8 inches square. Old, worn, the kind surveyors used to map territory and record claims. The second was a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a piece of rock about the size of my fist. Gold ore, high grade. Even in the dim lantern light I could see the veins of pure gold running through the quartz like lightning frozen in stone. "My father didn't just survey land, Mr. Moss," Theia said quietly. "He found something, and the mine owner killed him for it." She held up the ledger. "This contains the location of the richest gold seam in Montana Territory. My father staked a claim in my name 2 weeks before he died. Legal. Registered with the territorial office. Viktor Cross, the mine owner, wants this ledger. That's why he sent Dutch to find me." I stared at the gold, at the ledger, at this woman who'd been hunted across hundreds of miles for something that could make her wealthy beyond imagination or get her killed. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. Theia looked at me with eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, lost too much. "Because tomorrow they'll come back," she said. "Dutch will bring more men, maybe Cross himself, and when they do, you need to decide something." She paused. "Are you willing to die for a stranger's gold?" I looked at that gold ore, thought about what it represented. Wealth, power, the kind of money that could change everything. Then I looked at Theia Harrow, at this woman who'd been treated like property her whole life, who'd been hunted and hurt and nearly broken, who had every reason to trust no one but was trusting me anyway. And I realized she wasn't asking me to die for gold. She was asking if I'd stand up for her right to own something in a world that said she couldn't, her right to exist as more than someone else's property or curiosity. I'd already made that choice at the creek. This was just confirmation. "Hide that ledger," I said, "and tomorrow we'll bury it somewhere they'll never find it. Because the only thing dying tomorrow is their chance of taking what's yours." Theia stared at me for a long moment. Then something in her face crumbled. Not weakness, relief. The terrible, overwhelming relief of realizing you're not alone anymore. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" I thought about Clara and Bea, about 7 closed doors, about 3 years of living with the weight of things left undone. "Because someone should have helped my family when they needed it," I said, "and they didn't. I can't change the past, but I can make damn sure I'm not part of the problem in the present." Theia nodded slowly. She wrapped the gold ore back in oilcloth and placed it in the satchel with the ledger. "There's something else you should know," she said. "This ledger doesn't just have the claim location, it has my father's journal entries from the last 6 months of his life." She opened the ledger to a page near the end, held it toward the lantern light so I could read. The handwriting was neat, precise, a surveyor's hand. May 15th, 1883. Viktor Cross approached me today at the assay office, made an offer to take Theia off my hands for $500, said she'd be happier as a curiosity than a daughter, that people would pay good money to see her. I told him to go to hell. He smiled and said I'd regret that. I fear I've endangered my girl. I read the words twice, felt cold rage settle in my gut. "Your father knew," I said. "He knew Cross would come after him. He wrote this ledger as insurance," Theia said. "If anything happened to him, I'd have proof of the claim, and proof of Cross's threats, evidence." "So this isn't just about gold," I said. "This is about justice." Theia looked at me with eyes that burned. "For me, they're the same thing. The gold is mine by right. My father died for it. Taking it back from Cross is justice." I understood. In Montana Territory in 1884, justice was whatever you could hold on to and defend. The law was a distant thing, slow to arrive and easy to corrupt. Real justice came from standing your ground and refusing to be moved. "Then we'll make sure you get both," I said. We buried the ledger that night. Not in the barn, too obvious. Instead, we walked half a mile into the hills behind my property and found a rock outcropping. Theia dug while I kept watch. We wrapped the ledger and the gold sample in oilcloth, placed them in a metal box, and buried it 3 feet deep. We marked the spot with a cairn of rocks that looked natural, random, just another pile of Montana stone. By the time we finished, dawn was breaking over the eastern ridge. We stood there, covered in dirt, exhausted. The sky turned from black to gray to pale blue. A new day, maybe our last. Certainly our most dangerous. "They'll come today," Theia said, "or tomorrow at the latest. Dutch won't wait long. He'll want to move before we can prepare." "Then we'd better get ready," I said. We walked back to the ranch as the sun rose. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. We'd cast our lot together. Now we'd see if that was enough. The sun was barely up when I saddled my horse for the ride into Bridger's Crossing. Theia stood in the barn doorway, watching me with that careful, measuring gaze I was starting to recognize. "You don't have to do this," she said. "If I don't go, Dutch will control the narrative. By noon, the whole town will think you're a murderer or worse. And you think they'll believe you over him?" I tightened the saddle cinch. "I think some will, and some is better than none." Theia crossed her arms. In the early morning light, the bruises on her face stood out stark and purple. The cut above her eyebrow had scabbed over, but it would scar, add another mark to a life already full of them. "What will you tell them?" she asked. "The truth. Your father died. Cross tried to claim you as property. You ran. That's all they need to know." "Not about the gold?" "Especially not about the gold." She nodded slowly. "Garrett, if this goes badly, if the town decides to come for me, I want you to know I won't blame you. You've already done more than anyone had a right to expect." I swung up into the saddle. "It's not going badly." "You can't know that." "No, but I can make damn sure I try." I rode out before she could argue further. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of pine and distant snow from the mountains. Spring in Montana was a negotiation between seasons, winter refusing to fully surrender its hold. Bridger's Crossing sat in a valley 12 miles east of my ranch. 200 souls, maybe less. The kind of town that existed because the railroad said it should, because miners needed supplies, because ranchers needed a place to sell cattle and buy seed. Main Street ran north to south, lined with false front buildings that tried to look bigger than they were. The saloon anchored the north end, run by Ida Crow. General store in the middle, Samuel Finch's domain for 30 years. Sheriff's office at the south end, where Wade Hollis did his best to keep peace in a place that didn't much want it. I rode in around 8 in the morning. Already I could tell something was wrong. Too many people on the street for a weekday morning. Too many clusters of conversation that stopped when I passed. Too many eyes following my progress down the main road. Dutch had gotten here first. I tied my horse outside Ida's saloon and pushed through the doors. The conversation died instantly. 20 men sat scattered around the room, too many for breakfast. This was a gathering, a meeting, and I was either the guest of honor or the accused. Dutch sat at a corner table drinking coffee like he owned the place. His cold-eyed friend, the one I'd driven off yesterday, sat beside him. They both looked up when I entered. Dutch smiled. "Well, well, the hero arrives." I ignored him. Walked to the bar where Ida stood polishing glasses. She was 52, iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, face weathered by wind and life. She'd buried 2 husbands and built a successful business in a territory that didn't make things easy for women. I respected her more than most men I knew. "Ida," I said. "Garrett." She set down the glass she'd been cleaning. "You're either brave or stupid riding in here this morning." "What's he been saying?" She glanced at Dutch. "That you're harboring a dangerous woman, that she killed a man in Helena, stole property, that you're protecting a criminal." "And what do you think?" Ida studied my face. We'd known each other 5 years. She'd served drinks at Clara's wake, had brought food to my cabin for months after Bee died, had never once treated me differently because my wife was Crow. "I think," she said slowly, "that Virgil Dutch is a liar and a coward, And I think you're neither of those things. But I also think you need to tell your side before this town makes up its mind." I turned to face the room. Every eye was on me. "Her name is Theia Harrow," I said, my voice carried in the sudden silence. "Her father was Edmund Harrow, British surveyor. He died 6 months ago in a mining accident in Helena. After his death, the mine owner, Viktor Cross, tried to claim Theia as debt payment, wanted to exhibit her in traveling shows. She ran. Dutch and his friends caught her on my land yesterday. I stopped them. That's the whole truth." Samuel Finch stood up from a table near the window. He was 62, bald, with the kind of face that looked permanently disapproving. He'd run the general store since before Montana was a territory. Had money, influence, and the ear of everyone who mattered. "If she ran from Viktor Cross," Samuel said, "then she brought his trouble to our town. Cross is a powerful man. He owns half the mines in this territory. He has connections with the territorial governor. If he wants this woman, and we help you hide her, what do you think happens to Bridger's Crossing?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. "She's not hiding," I said. "She's on my land, my responsibility." "Your land is 12 miles from here," Samuel continued. "But we're the nearest town. When Cross comes looking, and he will come looking, his men will stop here first. They'll ask questions. They'll cause trouble. They might even burn buildings to make a point. Is one stranger worth that risk?" More murmurs, louder now. Sheriff Wade Hollis stood up from where he'd been sitting near the door. He was 45, graying at the temples, with the tired eyes of a man who'd seen too much violence and wanted no more of it. "Garrett," he said, and his voice held something like sympathy. "If Cross is involved, this is bigger than you, bigger than your ranch. This is territorial politics, federal jurisdiction. You hand the woman over, let the law sort it out." "The law," I said quietly, "didn't help my wife and daughter 3 years ago. 7 people in this town watched them die and did nothing. Forgive me if I don't trust the law to do right by Theia Harrow." The room went silent. It was the first time I'd spoken publicly about what happened to Clara and Bee. The first time I'd put the accusation into words. Wade's face flushed. He'd been one of the 7, not the worst. Not the one who'd slammed the door in Bee's face, but he'd been home. He'd heard the knock. He'd made a choice. "That was different," he said. "Was it? A woman and child needed help. The town said no, because they were different, because they didn't belong. Now another woman needs help, and I'm hearing the same excuses." Dutch stood up, chair scraping loud against the wooden floor. "Don't let him guilt you," he said. "This isn't about his dead wife. This is about him protecting a criminal, a thief, and probably more than that, if you know what I mean." The implication was clear. Ugly. Men around the room shifted uncomfortably. I felt rage flare white-hot in my chest, kept it locked down, barely. "Careful, Dutch," I said softly. "You're talking about a woman who can't defend herself from your lies. Then bring her here. Let her defend herself." "So you and Cross can grab her the moment she sets foot in town? Not likely." Samuel Finch raised his hand. "Enough. We're not solving this by arguing. I propose we vote. Simple majority. Do we send word to Viktor Cross that his property is at Moss's ranch, or do we stay neutral?" "She's not property," Ida said sharply. "She's not one of us either," Samuel replied. "And that's what matters. We take care of our own. That's how towns survive." "By abandoning strangers?" I asked. "By making hard choices." The vote was called. Hands went up around the room. I watched faces I'd known for years, people I'd worked beside, drunk with, helped during hard times. 45 hands for sending word to Cross, 23 against. The margin was bigger than I'd expected, worse than I'd hoped. Samuel looked at me with something that might have been regret, or might have been satisfaction. Hard to tell. "The vote is decided," he said. "We'll send a telegram to Helena today. Inform Viktor Cross that his property is at the Moss Ranch. After that, this town washes its hands of the matter." I looked around the room one more time, saw fear in some faces, greed in others, cowardice in most. Then I looked at the 23 who'd voted against. Ida Crow, the blacksmith, Josiah Crane, young Lee's mother, Marla, a handful of others, not many, but enough to matter. Fine, I said. Send your telegram. But when Cross's men come, they'll have to go through me first. And if this town helps them, if any of you ride with them or guide them or give them aid, you'll have that blood on your hands. And I promise you I'll make sure everyone knows what you chose. I turned and walked toward the door. Dutch called after me. You're a dead man, Moss. You just don't know it yet. I stopped, turned back, met his eyes. 3 years ago, I died when my family did. Everything since has been borrowed time. So if Viktor Cross wants to collect, he's welcome to try. But I guarantee he'll pay more than he's bargained for. I pushed through the doors and out into morning sunlight. Josiah Crane caught up with me as I was untying my horse. He was 50, built like the iron he worked, with arms thick as fence posts and a face scarred by forged sparks. His brother had died in one of Cross's mines 3 years back. Cave in. Cross had paid off the inquest, ruled it an accident, paid the widow $50 and told her to be grateful. I'll ride with you, Josiah said without preamble. This could get you killed. We're all dying, Moss. The question is whether we die for something or nothing. My brother died for Cross's profit. I'd rather die stopping him. I looked at this man, this stranger who was offering his life for a woman he'd never met, a cause that wasn't his. Why? I asked. Because someone needs to stand up. Might as well be us. I held out my hand. He gripped it. His palm was calloused, his grip like iron. We ride back together, I said. Get your weapons and supplies. Meet me at my ranch by noon. Already packed, Josiah said. He gestured to a horse tied outside the blacksmith shop, saddlebags bulging with supplies. You were that sure I'd accept? I was that sure you'd need help. We rode out of Bridger's Crossing together. Behind us I could feel the weight of watching eyes. The town had made its choice. Now we'd see if they could live with it. The ride back took 2 hours. We didn't talk much. Josiah wasn't a man for idle conversation, and I appreciated the silence. Gave me time to think, to plan. Cross would come. The only question was when and with how many men. We crested the final rise and my ranch came into view. Theia was in the yard, working. She'd torn down a section of rotted fence and was replacing posts. Even from a distance, I could see the ease with which she swung the sledgehammer, driving posts into hard Montana soil with strikes that would have exhausted most men. She looked up as we approached. Her eyes went from me to Josiah and back again. How bad? She asked. Town voted to inform Cross, 45 to 23. She nodded like she'd expected it. When will he come? Tomorrow at the earliest. Day after more likely. Gives us time to prepare. Us? She looked at Josiah. Josiah Crane, he said. I'm here to help. Why? Because Cross killed my brother and got away with it. This is as close to justice as I'm likely to get. Theia studied him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. When Josiah took it, I saw him wince at her grip. She was stronger than she looked, and she looked strong. Thank you, she said simply. We spent the rest of the day fortifying the ranch. Josiah knew defensive positions from the war. He'd fought at Antietam, seen what happened when positions weren't properly prepared. He directed while Theia and I worked. We boarded up the cabin windows, leaving narrow gun slits, built firing positions at the corners, stockpiled water inside in case of fire, moved ammunition from the barn to the cabin, set up a secondary position in the barn loft in case we needed to fall back. Theia showed us techniques her mother's people used, tripwires made from fishing line and tin cans, false trails that led to dead ends, ways to make 3 people look like more. We worked through the afternoon and into evening. By the time the sun set, the ranch looked like a small fortress. As we sat around a fire in the yard eating beans and hardtack, Marla arrived. She came alone, riding a tired-looking mare. She was 38, thin from hard work and harder years. Her husband had died 5 years back. She'd raised young Lee alone ever since. working as a laundress to make ends meet. "Mrs. Kane," I said, standing, "it's late to be writing." "I brought something," she said. She dismounted and pulled a small wooden box from her saddlebag. "Rifle cartridges, 40 rounds. It's all I can spare." "I can't take these," I said. "You might need them." "I need to live with myself more than I need bullets," Marla said. She looked at Theia. "I'm sorry for what the town decided. I voted against it, but my vote doesn't count for much." "It counted," Theia said quietly. "More than you know." Marla nodded. Then she looked at me. "Lee wants to help. I told him no. He's just 18, but he's got a good eye and a steady hand, if you need another rifle." "Keep him safe," I said. "This isn't his fight." "It's everyone's fight," Marla said. "But I'll keep him home. Just know that you have friends. Not many, but some." She rode away into darkness. We watched until her lantern disappeared over the ridge. 23 votes, Theia said softly. 23 people willing to stand against the majority. Maybe that's enough. "It has to be," I said. That night, we took turns keeping watch. Josiah took first shift. I tried to sleep, but couldn't. Too much adrenaline. Too much thinking about what was coming. Around midnight, I gave up and walked outside. Theia was standing in the yard, looking at the stars. The night was clear, cold, the sky so full of stars it looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. "Bad dreams." "About tomorrow?" "About yesterday, today, every day for the past 6 months." I stood beside her. We watched the sky in silence. Finally, Theia spoke. "Garrett, if we don't survive tomorrow, I want you to know something. Don't talk like that. Listen," she said firmly. "I've been running for 6 months. Running from men who saw me as something to use. Running from places where I didn't belong. And I was starting to think maybe they were right. Maybe there was no space in this world for someone like me." She turned to look at me. In the starlight, her eyes were dark and deep. "But then you showed up at that creek. You cut those ropes. You treated me like a person, like someone worth saving. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" "Hope." The word hung between us. Simple. Profound. The most dangerous thing a person could carry in a world like this. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. Just stood there beside her, 2 people who'd been broken by the world, finding something that might be strength in each other. The moment stretched. Then Josiah's voice called from the barn loft. "Rider coming? From the east." We moved fast. I grabbed my rifle. Theia ran to the barn. Josiah stayed in the loft, his rifle trained on the approaching rider. The figure materialized out of darkness, moving slow, hands held high and visible. "Don't shoot," a young voice called. "It's Lee Kane." I lowered my rifle but didn't set it down. "What are you doing here? Your mother said to keep you home." Lee rode into the firelight. He looked terrified and determined in equal measure. "I came to warn you," he said, words tumbling out fast. "Cross's men are coming tomorrow at dawn, not just Dutch, 12 men total, maybe more. And Dutch told them to take the woman alive, but you they can kill on sight." "How do you know this?" "I was at the saloon, hiding. I heard Dutch talking to the men Cross sent ahead. They're camped 5 miles north, waiting for dawn. 12 men, maybe more. The odds had just gotten a lot worse." "Why are you telling us?" Theia asked, stepping out of the barn. Lee looked at her. His eyes went wide. He'd probably heard descriptions, but seeing her in person was different. To his credit, he didn't stare, just met her eyes. "Because my ma said if I didn't help, she'd tan my hide. She said Mr. Moss is the only good man in this valley, and good men need all the help they can get." Despite everything, I almost smiled. Marla Kane was a force of nature. "You need to go home, Lee," I said, "before anyone knows you were here." "I can shoot," Lee said. "I can help." "You can help best by staying alive. Your mother needs you. This fight isn't yours." "Isn't it?" Lee's voice cracked with emotion. "My pa died because he stood up to a rich man who cheated him. Nobody helped. Nobody even tried. And I watched my ma break herself working to feed us because the town wouldn't help a widow. This fight is exactly mine. I understood what he was saying. Understood the need to stand up, to matter, to prove you weren't like the people who looked away. But he was 18, just a kid. Not this time, I said gently. But Lee, when this is over, if we're still alive, you come see me. I'll teach you everything I know. Deal? Lee looked like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded. Deal. But Mr. Moss, there's something else. Cross himself is coming. He's leading the men personally. That changed things. Viktor Cross wouldn't come unless he was sure of victory, unless he had overwhelming force. How many men total? Josiah asked from the loft. I counted 20 horses at the camp, Lee said. Could be more. 20 men, against 3. The mathematics were simple and brutal. Lee rode away into the night. We watched until the darkness swallowed him. Then we looked at each other, Theia, Josiah, me. 20-3, Josiah said. I've faced worse odds. When? I asked. Never. But there's a first time for everything. Despite the situation, I laughed. It came out harsh, almost desperate, but it was real. Theia didn't laugh. She was staring into the distance, her jaw set. We can't win a straight fight, she said. 20 men with rifles. We'd be cut down in minutes. So we don't fight straight, Josiah said. We make them come to us. Force them into positions where numbers don't matter as much. How? Theia asked. Josiah smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. How much do you know about the Alamo? They lost, I pointed out. But they made the other side pay for it, and they had a lot less warning than we do. We spent the rest of the night preparing, not for victory, for survival, and for making damn sure that if we went down, Viktor Cross would remember the cost. Dawn came gray and cold. We'd worked through the night, grabbing sleep in shifts, never more than one person resting at a time. The ranch had been transformed. Every window in the cabin was now boarded solid except for gun slits. We'd built a firing step inside so we could shoot from elevated positions. Water barrels stood in every corner in case of fire. Ammunition was distributed throughout the cabin, no single point of failure. The barn had become a secondary fortress. Josiah had reinforced the loft, built firing positions that covered the approaches. We'd rigged the main barn door so it could be barred from inside but looked normal from outside. Between the cabin and barn we'd dug rifle pits, shallow depressions covered with brush. A man could lie flat, invisible from a distance with clear fields of fire. Theia had created a spider web of tripwires around the perimeter, tin cans on fishing line. Touch one and every person in the ranch would hear the rattle. Simple, effective. We'd also prepared fallback positions, trenches leading from cabin to barn, giving us covered movement between the two buildings. Escape routes into the hills if everything went wrong. It was the most prepared I'd been for anything since the war, and it still didn't feel like enough. The sun rose higher. We waited. Josiah was in the barn loft, rifle ready. Theia was in the cabin with me. We'd argued about that. She wanted to fight from the barn, said her strength would be useful in hand-to-hand if it came to that. I'd insisted she stay in the cabin where the walls were thicker. We'd compromised. She'd start in the cabin. If the barn became threatened, she'd move there. Tell me about your family, Theia said suddenly. We were sitting behind the cabin's thick log walls, rifles across our laps, waiting for men who wanted us dead. And she wanted to talk about the past. Why? I asked. Because if I'm going to die defending your home, I'd like to know what kind of life was lived here before. Fair enough. Clara was Crow, I said. We met in Helena 7 years ago. I was working as a carpenter. She was working in a general store. The owner was Indian-friendly. Rare in those days. Still rare, Theia said. Yeah. We married despite her family's objections. Despite my family's objections. Despite basically everyone telling us it was a bad idea. Moved out here. Built this place with our own hands. I looked around the cabin. Every log, every board. Clara and I had shaped this place together. B was born a year later, 6 pounds, screaming loud enough to wake the dead. Clara said she got her lungs from my side of the family, said all white men were loud. Theia smiled slightly. Was she right? Probably. Bee grew up wild, happy. She'd chase butterflies all morning, come home covered in mud and grass stains. Clara would pretend to be angry, but she loved it, loved watching our daughter be free in a way Clara never got to be. What happened? Theia asked gently. The real story. I'd told her the condensed version, the doors that closed, the heat stroke, but I'd left out the details that still cut like broken glass. It was July 14th, Sunday. Clara and Bee went to church service. I was supposed to go, but I'd stayed up late the night before, drinking, feeling sorry for myself because the crops had failed again, because money was tight, because I was tired. The words came hard. I hadn't spoken them aloud before. The wagon wheel broke 100 yards from the church, split right down the middle. Must have been a flaw in the wood. Clara couldn't fix it alone. Bee was too small to help, so Clara sent her to knock on doors, ask for help. I closed my eyes, could still see it. Bee's small fist knocking, waiting, doors opening just wide enough to see who it was, then closing. 7 houses, 7 doors, people Clara knew, people who'd bought her bread at church fundraisers, people who'd smiled at Bee in the general store. Every single one said no. Because she was half Indian, Theia said. Because she didn't belong. Because helping her would mean taking a side, and it was safer to stay neutral. Like the town yesterday. Exactly like that. I opened my eyes, stared at the gun slit in front of me. By the time I woke up from my hangover and rode to town looking for them, it was 3 in the afternoon. July heat, over 100 degrees. Clara had given Bee all the water, kept her in the shade under the wagon. But it wasn't enough. You got them home? Got them home. Got the doctor. He said Bee had heat stroke, brain swelling. She was unconscious, never woke up, died 2 days later in the bed Theia sleeps in now. Theia's hand found mine, squeezed. Clara held on for a week. Doctor said her body was fine, but she'd given up, lost the will to live. She died on July 22nd, said Bee's name once, smiled like she was seeing something beautiful, and then she was gone. I'm sorry, Theia said. I buried them on the hill behind the cabin, under a cottonwood tree, put wildflowers on their graves every week for 3 years, and every week I swore the same thing. Never again. Never walk past someone in need. Never be like those 7 people who closed their doors. Is that why you're doing this? Theia asked. Because of a promise to the dead? Partially, but also because of you. Me? I turned to look at her. This woman who'd been treated like property, who'd been exhibited and hunted and hurt, who still had enough strength to stand up. You remind me of Clara, I said. Not in looks, but in spirit. Clara never accepted the box the world tried to put her in, never let people tell her she was less than. She married who she wanted, lived how she wanted, raised our daughter to be proud of both sides of her heritage. She sounds remarkable. She was. And you are too. You could have given up, could have let Dutch take you back to Cross, could have accepted that you were property. But you didn't. You ran, you fought, you survived. That takes strength most people don't have. Theia was quiet for a long moment. My mother used to say something, she said finally. In Crow. It translates roughly to, the tallest tree catches the most wind, but its roots grow deepest. She said it whenever people stared, whenever children threw stones, whenever I asked why I couldn't be normal. She was right. Was she? I'm 28 years old, Garrett. I've never had a friend I didn't lose, never had a place I could stay, never had someone look at me and see anything other than my size. Until you. I see you, I said, the real you, and what I see is someone worth fighting for. She met my eyes. For a moment the walls came down. I saw past the careful defenses, the survival instincts, the armor she'd built. Saw the woman underneath. Brilliant, fierce, lonely beyond words. If we survive this, she said quietly, I don't want to run anymore. Then we'll make sure you don't have to." A tin can rattled in the distance, then another. We moved to our positions, waited, but no attack came. Just the wind moving through our tripwires. False alarm. We sat back down, adrenaline slowly draining. "Tell me about the gold," I said. "The claim. What's it worth?" Theia pulled out the small ore sample she'd kept hidden in her pocket, turned it over in her hands. "My father spent 2 years surveying Montana territory for mining companies. He learned to read geology, learned where to look for signs of valuable deposits. In his spare time, he'd prospect, test his theories. And he found something. He found the biggest gold seam anyone's discovered since the California rush. Pure vein gold, thousands of ounces, maybe tens of thousands, enough to buy a small kingdom. And he filed the claim in your name. 2 weeks before he died. Said it was my inheritance, my future. Said no matter what happened to him, I'd always have this. A way to be independent, to never have to rely on anyone. But Cross found out. Cross owned the assay office, bribed the clerk to show him all new claims. When he saw my father's claim, saw the location, saw the estimated value, he made his move. Offered to buy my father out for $500, a fraction of what it was worth. Your father refused. My father told him to go to hell. Cross didn't like that. 2 weeks later, there was a cave-in at my father's regular survey site. A tunnel collapsed. Cross said it was an accident. But my father was careful. He'd been surveying for 15 years without a serious injury. And then suddenly, the day after he refuses Cross's offer, the tunnel collapses. You think Cross killed him? I know Cross killed him. I just can't prove it. The territorial marshal ruled it an accident. Case closed. And then Cross showed up at our home with a bill of sale saying my father owed back wages, said I was part of the estate, property to be liquidated. Rage flared in my chest. How did you escape? My father had warned me. His last words before he went to the mine that day were, "If anything happens to me, run. Take the ledger and run. Don't trust anyone." So when Cross came with his papers and his hired men, I climbed out a window and ran. And you've been running ever since. 6 months, sleeping in barns, stealing food when I had to, working odd jobs when I could find someone willing to hire me, trying to get far enough away that Cross would give up. But he never did. He sent Dutch, sent others, kept hunting. Because as long as you're alive, you can contest the claim. Exactly. Dead, I'm no threat. The claim becomes abandoned property. Cross can file a new claim on the same site. Legally, it's his. But alive, I'm a witness. Evidence. Proof that he killed my father and tried to steal what was mine. I understood now. This wasn't about gold for Theia. It was about justice. About proving her father's death mattered. About claiming what was rightfully hers in a world that said she had no rights. When this is over, I said, we'll file an official complaint with the territorial marshal. We'll use the ledger as evidence. Your father's journal entries, witnesses. We'll build a case. Cross has money, influence, politicians in his pocket. Maybe, but he doesn't have right on his side, and sometimes that's enough. Theia looked at me with eyes that wanted to believe, but had been disappointed too many times. You really think we can win? She asked. I think we can try, and trying is all we've got. The sun climbed higher. Still no attack. The waiting was worse than the fighting would be. At least in a fight, you knew what to do. Waiting just gave you time to think, to doubt, to imagine all the ways things could go wrong. Josiah called down from the barn loft around noon. Movement on the northern ridge. We moved to the gun slits, looked out. 20 men on horseback spread out in a line, moving slow, deliberate, making sure we saw them coming. In the center, riding a gray stallion, was a man I recognized from descriptions. Silver hair, expensive clothes, cold eyes. Viktor Cross had arrived. They stopped 500 yards out, just beyond rifle range, close enough to talk, far enough to be safe. Cross dismounted, walked forward alone, stopped at 300 yards. "Garrett Moss," he called. His voice carried across the distance. educated, refined, the voice of a man used to being obeyed. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." I stepped out of the cabin, stood in the doorway where he could see me, rifle in hand. "Theia Harrow belongs to no one but herself," I called back. "Is that what she told you?" Cross laughed. "Did she mention that her father signed her over to me? That she's legally bound property? Did she mention you murdered her father?" That stopped his laughter. "Careful, Moss. Slander is a serious accusation. So is murder, and theft, and attempted kidnapping." Cross was silent for a moment. Then he smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "I like you, Moss. You've got spirit. So I'm going to make you an offer. Send out Theia Harrow and the survey ledger. Do that, and you live. Your ranch stays standing. You can go back to your quiet life." "And if I refuse?" "Then I burn you out. Kill you and anyone helping you. And take what's mine anyway. Your choice. But make it fast. My patience has limits." I looked back at the cabin. Theia stood at the window watching. Our eyes met. She shook her head once. Firm. Final. I turned back to Cross. "Here's my counteroffer," I called. "You ride away now. Drop your claim on Theia's property. Turn yourself in to the territorial marshal for murdering Edmund Harrow. Do that, and I won't kill you where you stand." Cross's smile disappeared. "You're a fool, Moss. You're one man protecting a worthless half-breed freak. Do you really think you can stand against 20 armed men?" "Not one man," Josiah called from the barn loft. "3, and we've got better cover and better positions. You want to take us, Cross? You'll pay for it in blood." 3 men, Cross said, against 20. "The mathematics are simple." "So was the Alamo," I called back, "and we've got a lot more warning than they did." Cross stared at me, calculating, weighing costs against benefits. Then he turned and walked back to his men. I watched him mount his horse, watched him gesture to his men, watched them spread out, beginning to encircle the ranch. The siege had begun. The first shot came at 3 in the afternoon, not aimed at us. A warning shot that kicked up dirt 50 yards from the cabin. Cross's way of saying the talking was over. I watched from the gun slit as his men finished their encirclement. They'd spread out in a loose ring around the ranch, staying just beyond effective rifle range. Smart, patient. They weren't in a hurry. They could wait us out, starve us out, or burn us out. The choice was theirs. "They're not attacking," Theia said from her position at the opposite wall. "Why?" "Because Cross is a businessman," Josiah called from the barn. "He's calculating costs. Rushing us means casualties. Maybe a lot of casualties. He's trying to decide if we're worth the price." "Are we?" Theia asked. "To him? No. But he can't back down now, not in front of his men, not after riding all this way. So he'll probe, test our defenses, try to find a weakness." Josiah was right. Over the next hour, Cross sent small groups forward. 2 men here, 3 men there. Never a full assault, just testing, seeing how we'd respond. We let them come within 200 yards before firing. Not to kill. Warning shots, enough to make them scatter back to safety. Enough to show we had ammunition and knew how to use it. But each probe gave them information. They learned our firing positions, our fields of view, the dead zones where we couldn't cover. By 4 o'clock, Cross had a complete picture of our defenses. That's when the real attack began. 10 men rushed the barn from the east. A coordinated assault. They came fast, using the natural dips in terrain for cover, firing as they ran. Josiah opened up from the loft. His rifle cracked steady, methodical. 1 shot, 2, 3. 2 men went down. The others scattered, diving behind rocks and brush, but 3 kept coming. They reached the barn's east wall, the one blind spot from Josiah's position. "They're trying to burn it," Theia said. She was right. I could see one man pulling something from his saddlebag. A bottle, cloth stuffed in the neck, fire. I aimed through the gun slit. The range was long, 200 yards, wind coming from the west. I'd have to lead the target, account for drop. I squeezed the trigger. The man with the bottle jerked and fell. The bottle shattered on the ground. Whatever was inside soaked into the dirt. The other two men grabbed their fallen comrade and dragged him back toward cover. "Good shot," Theia said. "Lucky shot," I corrected. My hands were shaking. I'd killed men in the war. Thought I'd left that behind. Thought I'd never have to do it again. But here we were. The attack on the barn had been a diversion. While we'd been focused east, 5 men had worked their way north. They reached the perimeter of Theia's tripwire network. Tin cans rattled. The sound cut through the afternoon air like alarm bells. The 5 men froze, realized they'd been detected, started to retreat. Josiah's rifle spoke again. One man went down hard. Didn't get up. The others ran, made it back to their lines. Score after the first engagement. 2 of Cross's men dead. 1 wounded. 0 casualties on our side, but we'd used a lot of ammunition and shown Cross that we'd fight back hard. He'd adjust his tactics accordingly. The sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Long shadows stretched across the valley. The temperature dropped. Spring evenings in Montana were cold, especially after the sun disappeared. Cross's men built fires at their positions, settled in. They weren't leaving. This was a siege now. They'd wait until dark, then try again under cover of night. "We need to eat," I said. "Rest in shifts. It's going to be a long night." Theia moved to the small stove in the cabin's corner, started heating beans and coffee. Simple food, but it would keep our strength up. Josiah came down from the barn loft, ran across the open ground to the cabin in a crouch, slipped through the door, breathing hard. "They've got 20 men out there," he said, "minus the 2 dead and 1 wounded. 17 left. Still bad odds." "Could be worse," I said. "How?" "Could be 30. Josiah laughed. It came out harsh, edged with exhaustion. "Your optimism is inspiring." We ate quickly. The food tasted like ash in my mouth, but I forced it down, needed the energy for what was coming. As darkness fell, we prepared. Josiah took the barn loft again. "Best vantage point for watching the approaches." Theia and I stayed in the cabin covering the other angles. The night came moonless. Thick clouds had rolled in from the west, blocking the stars. Perfect conditions for an attack. We waited in darkness. No lanterns, no fires, just the sound of our breathing and the occasional creak of the cabin settling. The attack came at midnight. Not a frontal assault. Something worse. Fire arrows. They arced through the darkness like falling stars. 6 of them, aimed at the barn roof. 2 missed. 4 hit. The dry wood caught immediately. "Josiah!" I shouted. "Get out!" His rifle cracked twice from the loft. Then I saw him climbing out the loft door, sliding down the roof. He hit the ground running, sprinting toward the cabin. Bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. He zigzagged, making himself a hard target. Made it to the cabin door. I yanked it open. He dove inside. Behind him, the barn was fully engulfed. Flames climbed the walls, licked at the roof. The horses we'd kept in the corral panicked, broke through the fence, scattered into the night. Our secondary position was gone. All our supplies in the barn, the ammunition, the extra weapons, everything. "Son of a bitch," Josiah gasped, catching his breath. "They suckered us, made us think they'd wait for dawn." "We've still got the cabin," I said, "and we've still got fight left." But the situation had just gotten much worse. We were down to 1 defensive position, low on ammunition, and Cross knew it. The barn fire lit up the night like a beacon. We could see Cross's men clearly now. They'd moved closer during the darkness, using the time we'd been focused on the barn. They were within 100 yards, some even closer. Dutch's voice called from the darkness. "Give it up, Moss. Send out the woman and we'll let you live." "Go to hell, Dutch," I shouted back. "Your choice." They rushed us from 3 sides simultaneously. A coordinated assault. Professional. These weren't just hired guns. Cross had brought men who knew what they were doing. Our rifles blazed. I fired through the east gun slit. Theia took the west. Josiah covered the north. Men fell. Others kept coming. They reached the cabin walls, started prying at the boarded windows, trying to find weakness. One man got a pry bar under a board, started levering it loose. Theia grabbed a kitchen knife. When the board came free and a hand reached through, she slashed. The man screamed, jerked back. But they kept trying, kept probing. Then I smelled it. Kerosene. "They're going to burn us out," Josiah said. He was right. I could hear liquid splashing against the cabin's north wall, could smell the sharp chemical stink. We had maybe seconds before they lit it. "The tunnel," Theia said. "The escape route." We dug a covered trench from the cabin to a cluster of rocks 30 yards south. It was crude, barely deep enough to crawl through, but it was our only chance. "Go," I said to Theia. "Both of you. I'll cover." "Not without you," Theia said. "I'm right behind you. Go." Josiah grabbed Theia's arm, pulled her toward the trapdoor we'd cut in the floor. They dropped down into the tunnel. I fired 3 more shots through the gun slits, making noise, making Cross's men think we were still fighting from inside. Then I dropped into the tunnel and pulled the trapdoor shut above me. The tunnel was pitch black, narrow. The earth pressed in from all sides. I crawled forward, following the sound of Theia and Josiah ahead. Behind me, I heard the whoosh of flames catching. The cabin was burning. The tunnel seemed endless. Dirt fell from the ceiling. My shoulders scraped the sides. Panic clawed at my chest. Then I saw dim light ahead. The tunnel exit. I emerged into night air. Theia and Josiah were already out, pressed against the rocks, rifles ready. Behind us, the cabin was an inferno. Flames reached toward the sky. The heat was intense even from 30 yards away. Cross's men were cheering. They thought we'd burned inside. "Now what?" Josiah whispered. I looked around. We were south of the cabin. The rocks gave us some cover, but not much. Cross's men were between us and the hills, between us and escape. We were trapped. Then I heard hoofbeats. Multiple horses, coming fast from the east. Cross's reinforcements. Had he called for more men? We pressed deeper into the rocks. Waited. 6 riders crested the rise. But they weren't riding toward Cross's men. They were riding toward us. And leading them was Ida Crow. She reined in her horse near our position. Behind her were Marla, young Lee, and 3 other townspeople I recognized from the vote. The ones who'd voted against sending word to Cross. "Figured you could use help," Ida said calmly, like she'd just arrived for Sunday dinner instead of a battle. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "What someone should have done 3 years ago for Clara and Bee. Standing up." She dismounted. The others followed. They were armed. Not with fancy rifles, just old shotguns and hunting rifles. The weapons of ordinary people who'd decided extraordinary times called for extraordinary courage. "We don't have much time," Marla said. "Cross's men saw us coming. They'll adjust." She was right. I could see movement in Cross's line, confusion. They'd been celebrating victory. Now they had to deal with unexpected arrivals. "Can you shoot?" Josiah asked Ida. "I've been shooting men's egos down in my saloon for 30 years, she said. "Reckon I can manage actual shooting if needed." Despite everything, I smiled. Then let's even these odds. We had 9 people now, still outnumbered, but not as badly. And we had the element of surprise. "Here's the plan," I said quickly. "We split up. Josiah, take Lee and 2 others. Circle north. Hit their left flank. Ida, you and Marla take the east. I'll take Theia and 1 other. Push center. We make them think we've got more people than we do. Make them panic." "And if they don't panic?" Ida asked. "Then we improvise." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. We split up, moved into position. The burning cabin and barn gave us light to see by, but also made us visible targets. I counted down from 3. On 0, we opened fire. 9 rifles cracking simultaneously. The sound was enormous, echoing off the rocks and hills. Cross's men scattered. They'd been bunched up, celebrating. Now they were diving for cover, trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. We kept firing, moving between shots, making them think we were everywhere. Young Lee turned out to be a crack shot. His rifle barked steady as clockwork. 3 shots, 3 men down. Ida's shotgun boomed. At close range it was devastating, but Cross's men were professionals. They recovered fast, started organizing, returning fire. Bullets whined past my head, kicked up dirt at my feet. Theia fired beside me. Calm, focused. Every shot counted. We were pushing them back. Actually pushing them back. Then I saw Dutch. He'd worked his way around to the south, was flanking our position. "Theia, you're 6!" I shouted. She spun. Her rifle was empty. No time to reload. Dutch raised his pistol, grinned. The shot that killed him came from an unexpected direction. Sheriff Wade Hollis lowered his rifle. He was standing on the ridge above us, backlit by the burning buildings. "Told you I'd help," he called down. "Just took me a while to work up the nerve." He wasn't alone. 5 more men from town stood with him. The ones who'd voted to send word to Cross. The ones who'd chosen safety over courage. They'd changed their minds. Samuel Finch was there, the general store owner who'd called the vote against us. He looked old and tired and ashamed. "We were wrong, Moss," he called down. "We were cowards, but we're here now." Cross saw his advantage evaporating, saw his men being cut down, saw the townspeople he'd counted on to stay neutral picking sides against him. He made a choice. "Fall back," he shouted. "Everyone back to the horses!" His men retreated, fighting as they went, keeping us pinned. But they were running. We pressed the attack, drove them north, away from the ranch, away from Theia. They reached their horses, mounted up. Cross was the last to leave. He sat on his gray stallion staring at me across 100 yards of burning grassland. "This isn't over, Moss," he shouted. "I'll be back, with the law, with the territorial militia. You'll hang for this." "Come back any time," I shouted back. "We'll be ready." Cross wheeled his horse and galloped into darkness. His remaining men followed. We'd won, at least for tonight. I lowered my rifle, looked around at the faces lit by fire. Townspeople who'd risked everything. Friends I hadn't known I had. Theia stood beside me, covered in dirt and smoke, blood on her hands from where she'd slashed the man through the window. Alive. We'd both survived. "Thank you," I said to Ida, to Marla, to Wade and Samuel and all the others. "You didn't have to come." "Yes, we did," Wade said quietly. "We failed Clara and Bea. We weren't going to fail again." The words hit hard, unexpected. I'd carried rage toward this town for 3 years, and here they were, making amends the only way they could, by standing when it mattered. "Is everyone all right?" Theia asked. "Anyone hurt?" We did a quick count. Minor injuries, cuts and bruises. Young Lee had taken a bullet graze across his arm, but it was superficial. Marla was already binding it. But we'd all survived. Cross's men hadn't been as lucky. I counted 7 bodies scattered around the ranch. Maybe more in the darkness we couldn't see. The cost of greed, the price of thinking people were property. Dawn came cold and gray. We'd spent the night keeping watch, expecting Cross to return with reinforcements. But he hadn't come back. The northern horizon stayed empty. The cabin was gone. Just a smoking ruin, still hot enough to burn if you got too close. The barn was the same. 3 years of work reduced to ash in one night. But I was alive. Theia was alive. And that mattered more than buildings. The townspeople had stayed through the night. Now they helped us salvage what we could from the ruins. Not much. Some tools that hadn't burned. A few personal items from the cabin that had been in the stone root cellar. Ida brought food from town. Real food. Fresh bread and butter and eggs. We ate sitting in the yard, watching the sun burn off the morning mist. "What now?" Josiah asked. He looked exhausted. We all did. "Now we wait for the territorial marshal," I said. "Ida sent word last night. He should be here by tomorrow." "You think he'll side with us?" Theia asked. "Cross has money, influence." "He has bodies," Wade said. 7 dead men. "That requires investigation. Cross can't just buy his way out of that." Samuel Finch cleared his throat. "There's something I need to say." We all looked at him. This man who'd led the vote against us, who'd chosen safety over what was right. "I was wrong," Samuel said. His voice shook. "I told myself I was protecting the town, protecting our interests, but I was protecting my own fear. Fear of Cross, fear of conflict, fear of standing up." He looked at Theia. "Miss Harrow, I apologize. You deserved better from this town. You deserved better from me." Theia studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Apology accepted. But don't apologize to me. Apologize to the next stranger who needs help, and make sure you open the door." Samuel's eyes glistened. He nodded. The territorial marshal arrived the next afternoon. His name was Thomas Hart. He was 60, gray-bearded, with the weathered face of a man who'd spent his life outdoors. He rode with 2 deputies and a reputation for fairness that even Cross's money couldn't corrupt. We showed him everything. The ledger with Edmund Harrow's journal entries, the gold sample, the bodies of Cross's men, the burnt ruins of my ranch. Witnesses gave statements. Ida, Samuel, Wade, young Lee, all of them corroborating our story. Hart listened to everything, made notes, asked questions. Finally, he looked at Theia. "Miss Harrow, I'll need to verify your claim with the Territorial Land Office. But based on what I've seen here, Edmund Harrow's claim was legally filed in your name. Viktor Cross has no rights to it." "And the murder charge?" Theia asked. "My father's death?" Hart's expression darkened. "That'll require a full investigation. But these journal entries are compelling evidence. Combined with witness testimony about Cross's threats, I have enough to bring charges. He'll stand trial." "Will he hang?" Josiah asked. "If convicted?" "Yes. Montana doesn't take kindly to murder, especially when it's motivated by greed." Hart stood. "I'll ride to Helena today. Issue a warrant for Viktor Cross's arrest. He won't get far. And Miss Harrow, I'll make sure your claim is protected, legal. No one will take it from you." Theia's legs seemed to give out. She sat down hard on a nearby rock. For 6 months she'd been running, fighting, surviving. Now it was over. "Thank you," she whispered. Hart tipped his hat. "Just doing my job, ma'am." He rode away with his deputies. We watched until they disappeared over the eastern ridge. Then Theia started crying. Not quiet tears. Full body sobs that shook her frame. Months of fear and pain and loss pouring out all at once. I sat beside her, put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned into me and cried until she had nothing left. The others gave us privacy, drifted away to give us space. When the tears finally stopped, Theia looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What do I do now?" she asked. "I've spent 6 months just trying to survive. I never thought past that, never imagined actually winning." "You figure out what you want," I said, "what kind of life you want to build." "What if I don't know?" "Then you take time to learn." She was quiet for a long moment, looking at the ruins of my ranch, at the land that stretched out in all directions. "The gold claim," she said slowly. "It's worth a fortune, enough to do anything, go anywhere. I could leave Montana, start over somewhere no one knows me, somewhere I could just be normal." "You could," I agreed, "but I don't want to." I looked at her. "No? I've run my whole life, Garrett. From my mother's people because I wasn't Indian enough. From my father's world because I wasn't white enough. From Cross because I was property. I'm tired of running." "What do you want instead?" She met my eyes. "I want to stay here. I want to use the gold to build something, something that lasts, something that matters." "What kind of something?" "A school for children like me, mixed blood, orphans, the ones the towns turn away, the ones who don't fit in boxes." The idea hit me like a physical force. A school, here, on this land. "That's a beautiful idea," I said. "Would you help me?" Theia asked. "I have gold, but I don't have land, and I don't know how to build a school. But you do. You built this ranch. You could build something bigger." "Are you asking me to be your partner?" "Equal partners. I bring the money. You bring the land and the knowledge. We build it together." I thought about Clara and Bee, about 7 closed doors, about all the children who'd faced those same doors, who'd been told they didn't belong. We could give them a place where they did belong. "Equal partners," I said. "On one condition." "What's that?" "You never call yourself property again, or a freak, or too big, or anything else people tried to make you believe. You're exactly what you should be, and anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time." Theia smiled, a real smile, the first I'd seen from her. "Deal." We shook hands. Her grip was like iron. Strong. Sure. Partners. The town helped us rebuild. Not just a cabin this time, a real structure. 2 stories, 6 rooms. Enough space for a dozen students and 2 teachers. Ida organized the effort. Samuel donated materials. Josiah handled the metalwork. Wade and the other men who'd fought beside us provided labor. Even young Lee helped. Turned out he had a gift for carpentry. His hands were steady, his measurements precise. The building went up over 6 weeks. While we built, Theia filed legal claims, registered the school with the territorial office, hired teachers from back east. Good ones who didn't care about the color of their students' skin. The first students arrived in late summer. 12 children, ages 6 to 14, mixed blood, every one of them. Crow and white, Blackfoot and white, Cheyenne and white, the forgotten children of Montana Territory. They looked at Theia with wonder. Here was someone like them, someone who didn't fit, someone who'd not only survived but thrived. She was their hero, their proof that different didn't mean less. The school opened officially on September 1, 1884. We named it the Harrow Moss School for Territorial Children, both our names. Equal billing, equal partnership. The first day, I stood on the porch watching the children file in. Theia stood beside me. "Your daughter would have loved this," she said quietly. "She would have loved you." "You think Clara would have approved? Of me? Of us?" There was weight behind that last word. Us. It meant more than just business partners now. Over the months of building, something had shifted, deepened. I cared about Theia Harrow. Cared in a way I hadn't cared about anyone since Clara died. "Clara married me in a town that hated mixed couples," I said. "She fought every day for the right to exist as she was. She'd have loved anyone who stood up the way you did." "Stood up or just got stubborn?" "Both. She'd have appreciated the stubbornness most of all." Theia laughed. Then she looked at me seriously. "Garrett, there's something I need to tell you." "What?" "I'm not running anymore. I'm staying here, building this school, making this my home. And I'd like you to be part of that home, if you want." My heart hammered. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying I care about you. I'm saying these past months working beside you have been the happiest of my life. I'm saying I want to see if this, whatever this is between us, could be something more." I'd thought I was done with love. Thought I'd buried that part of myself with Clara and Bea. But looking at Theia, I realized I'd been wrong. Love wasn't something you used up. It was something that grew, changed, found new shapes. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that very much." She smiled, reached out, took my hand. We stood there on the porch watching children who'd been told they didn't belong anywhere find a place where they did. 2 people who'd been broken, who'd lost everything, who'd found each other and built something neither could have built alone. 6 months later we married, not in the church that had turned Clara away, in the school, with the children as witnesses. Ida officiated, said it was the finest wedding she'd ever seen. We didn't have rings. Theia said she'd rather spend the money on books for the students. I agreed. Our vows were simple. "I promise to stand beside you," Theia said, "as an equal, as a partner, for as long as we both live." "I promise never to walk past you when you need help," I said. "Never to close the door, never to make you small to make myself big." We kissed as husband and wife. The children cheered. Viktor Cross stood trial in the fall. The evidence was overwhelming. Edmund Harrow's journal, testimony from miners who'd witnessed threats, proof that Cross had bribed the inquest into Edmund's death. The jury deliberated for 40 minutes. Guilty of murder, guilty of attempted kidnapping, guilty of fraud. He was sentenced to hang. The execution took place on November 3, 1884. I didn't attend. Neither did Theia. We'd already won. Watching him die wouldn't change anything. Dutch and the cold-eyed man who'd been with him at the creek were tried as accomplices. Dutch got 15 years in territorial prison. The other man got 20. Justice, delayed but delivered. The years that followed were good. The school grew. One of our first students, a girl named Sarah Running Deer, became the first mixed-blood woman to practice medicine in Montana Territory. She returned to teach at the school every summer, showing the younger students that their dreams had no ceiling. Another, a boy who'd arrived at age 7 speaking no English, became a territorial judge. He made it his life's work to protect the rights of mixed-blood citizens. These weren't exceptions. They were the rule. Our students went into the world carrying the knowledge that they mattered, that they belonged, that different was not less. But it wasn't always easy. In 1892, a group of ranchers tried to shut us down, said we were teaching Indian children to think above their station. The town rallied around us. Ida organized, Samuel donated, Wade arrested the ringleaders for trespassing. We'd changed Bridger's Crossing, and Bridger's Crossing protected what we'd built. By 1890, we had 40 students. By 1895, 70. We added buildings, hired more teachers, expanded the curriculum. Children who'd been told they were worthless graduated and became doctors, lawyers, teachers, ranchers. They went into the world carrying the lesson we'd taught them. You belong. You matter. You are enough. Theia and I had 4 children of our own, 3 daughters and a son, all of them tall, all of them proud, all of them raised to know that different was not less. I never forgot Clara and Bee. Visited their graves every week, brought wildflowers, told them about the school, about the children we were helping, about the life Theia and I had built. I liked to think they approved. On warm summer evenings, Theia and I would sit on the porch of the school, watch the sun set over the mountains, listen to children playing in the yard. "Do you ever regret it?" Theia asked me once. "Giving up your ranch, your quiet life, for all this chaos?" I looked at the school, at the children, at this woman I'd found bleeding in a creek and decided to save, who'd saved me right back. "Not for a second," I said. She smiled, leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat like that as darkness fell. 2 people who'd been told they didn't belong, watching children who'd been told the same thing, find joy and safety and home. The Harrow Moss School operated for 43 years, educated over 600 children, changed Montana Territory from a place where mixed-blood children were outcasts to a place where they could thrive. When Theia died in 1927 at age 71, the funeral stretched for a mile. Former students came from across the country, men and women she'd taught, lives she'd changed. I followed her 6 months later. They said I died of pneumonia. But I think I just missed her too much to stay. We're buried on the hill behind the school, under a cottonwood tree, not far from where Clara and Bee rest. 4 graves, 4 lives that mattered. The school still stands. My great-grandson runs it now. He's tall like his great-grandmother, proud like his great-grandfather. Every year on the anniversary of the battle, the current students place flowers on our graves. They know the story, know what we fought for, know why it matters. They carry the lesson forward into their own lives. Stand up, don't run, help those who need it, and never, ever close the door. People ask sometimes how a widow and a wanderer built something that lasted over a century. The answer is simple. We saw each other. Not what the world said we should be, not the boxes people tried to put us in. We saw each other, and we chose to build something worthy of that seeing. A place where children could be seen too, where they could belong, where they could learn that the tallest trees catch the most wind, but their roots grow deepest. And when storms come, which they always do, deep roots are what keep you standing. The end.